Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Embracing Change Through Challenging Times. My name is Susan Smith and I'm a campaign lead for Nevermore Needed in Scotland. Nevermore Needed is a UK-wide campaign that aims to raise awareness of the role of the voluntary sector in responding to COVID and to debate its role in recovery and renewal and what comes next. Today we've got a fantastic lineup of speakers discussing change in the voluntary sector in Scotland. They're all champions of change in their own way. We've been through quite a lot of change this year. We've had it thrust upon us, and now we have news of a vaccine. There's a little bit of hope at the end of the tunnel. The reality is, though, we have no idea what we're going to see when lockdown ends, and the full emotional, physical and financial impact of COVID is yet to be seen. The news that we're seeing every day shows us that the reality is that voluntary organisations in Scotland are likely to see rising demand and are likely to be working on reduced budgets. So there's an awful lot for us to consider as voluntary organisations as we go into 2021. So these are some of the issues that the panel will be discussing. And before I introduce them and get them to give you their opening remarks, I'm just going to go over a little bit of housekeeping. First up, participants' lines are muted throughout the webinar, but you can chat with each other using the chat function on your screen. You can also ask live questions of the panel using the Q&A function. And please do upvote the questions that you would really like to be answered, as we probably won't get through them all. We'll have a couple of polls running. And I'll let you know when those polls are about to go live, and if you could answer them immediately, that would be great. And finally, the webinar is being videoed and it will be available on the SCVO website and the SCVO YouTube channel afterwards. So if you've enjoyed it, feel free to share it with your colleagues. So our panel today is Jacqui Taylor, Chief Executive of LifeLink, Ali Hunter, founder of Be More Human, and Nathan Sparling, the Chief Executive of HIV Scotland. Jacqui has been leading LifeLink, a Glasgow-based charity offering mental health and wellbeing services for around 7 years. She has a background in training, having headed up training and development for Carers UK for 5 years, and she's an MCR Pathways mentor. Jacqui and the team at LifeLink have been embracing change throughout this year and embarked on an 8-month transformational change programme in July 2020 called Way to Go, and I'm sure she'll tell you more about that in her opening remarks. Ali Hunter is the founder of Be More Human. From 12 years as CEO of Leavenmouth YMCA, through chairing the Tartan Army Children's Charity and taking on 9 years as a local councillor in Fife, alongside working in charities such as Columba 1400, Ali has a huge range of experience in the community and voluntary sector. He launched Be More Human in December 2019, just when people were starting to hear word of COVID. And it is designed to offer individual, team and organisational learning and development programmes, and it's working with a range of national and international organisations. Finally, we have Nathan Sparling, who is the Chief Executive of HIV Scotland. He's also a board member for the Association of Chief Officers of Scottish Voluntary Organisations and Voluntary Health Scotland. Nathan's background is in politics, having worked as a senior parliamentary advisor in the House of Commons before he joined HIV Scotland. Nathan's been a key voice in the debate about organisational change in the voluntary sector in response to COVID this year. So I'm now going to pass you over to our panel to speak for a few minutes before we start the question and answer session. So let's kick off with Jacqui.
Thank you, Susan, for that lovely introduction. Absolutely delighted to be here today. I will try to keep this as brief as possible because Maddie and Susan both know I can talk for Scotland and I can talk about this all day and we only have like an hour. So one of the things we've been asked to touch on is how have we coped with change and the impact of change during lockdown. And actually from LifeLink's point of view, we've actually coped remarkably well. You know, we invested in digital technology late 2019, and thank goodness that we did that because we managed to move our counselling service all online within 5 working days. And I can't take any credit from that. For that, that was all down to our amazing staff team who actually made that happen. And whilst that was a bit terrifying for them, we've been on a digital journey for 4 years, but it's still a bit scary actually, moving all of our service online. They coped with it really well and have absolutely embraced what is for us a new way of working. But we took the opportunity to have a think through COVID about, what happens post-pandemic? What does the world look like? What does the sector look like? And what do our services look like? And we've had a bit of change in our senior team. We know that some people are looking to move on next year. So we really took a hard look at LifeLink and had to think about, what opportunities does lockdown bring us aside from decorating the house and filling your time with other stuff. And we decided to embark on what Susan's referred to as the Way to Go programme. And for us, that was it's a wee bit cheesy, but it's a wee bit tongue in cheek as well. So it's about, this is the way to go for us as a business, and how we take our staff team with us along that journey. And it's not about fixing anything because nothing was broken. It was about saying, here's what we've achieved over the last 5 years, and actually how do we ramp that up? How do we make that even better? How do we reach more people using the technology that we now know works really well in delivering our service? But also thinking about all of the premises that we have. Do we need all of those if we've actually all been working remotely pretty successfully over the last 7 or 8 months? So it's really made us question our business model. And that's what we've looked at through the Way to Go programme. It's allowing us to look at some of our processes and procedures that were a wee bit clunky and antiquated, and allows us to actually look at how we support our staff team who are working remotely and in a kind of virtual environment. So it's actually been a tough year for us in some respects, but in other ways it's actually been quite exciting because it's given us the opportunity to deliver our products over either a video platform or a webinar platform, and it's really pushed us from an innovation point of view to really think about things a wee bit differently. So all in all, it's been mixed year, but pretty good.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jacqui.
You're welcome.
Nathan, what about HIV Scotland?
Thanks, Susan. And it's always great to hear Jacqui's story and LifeLink's journey. I think for HIV Scotland, I wish we'd gone through some transformational change over the last year. But in reality, because we're a policy campaigning and advocacy charity, most of what we did stayed on our laptops and just moved home. But it's more about thinking how we do things differently in the future. So there's a couple of things I wanted to touch on. 2 or 3 years ago, well, it was more than 3 years ago now, actually, lose track of time in the last 9 months. But over 3 years ago, we did a whole bit of work about HIV testing, and one of the main recommendations in that 8-month policy working group was for Scotland to have a HIV self-testing service. And up until March, that recommendation had never been actioned by anyone, despite calling for it several times. And it took COVID and HIV Scotland and Waverley Care to partner together because we saw a massive gap of services to make that service happen. And what we were able to do is realize that it needed to happen quickly. It didn't have to be perfect on day one. And that's, I think, an important point, is often in the third sector, we think something needs to be perfect before it goes live. And we took very much a quality improvement process that we were open and honest with people that used the service. When we set up the website, there was still some mistakes, some links that didn't work. We asked people to get in contact with us if they saw those. We developed the service. We continue to develop the service. And since we launched that in May, it took us 4 weeks to design the service that probably would have taken months before COVID. Since we launched that, 3,500 people have been able to access a HIV test that wouldn't have been able to do it in sexual health services because they were closed due to coronavirus. So that's a change for HIV Scotland in providing some services, but a change in the approach. And that's the important thing. It's about how we're approaching these things in because we knew we needed to make it happened, and we developed the service, and we continue to develop the service. We're about to change the test we use over the Christmas period, and do that whilst the service is still up and running. So that poses some other challenges. And then there's also the future, thinking about our work in the future. And for us, policy and changing the way that services operate in the NHS is a key focus. Normally, if we were to do that bit of work, we might, take a year, 18 months, 2 years to really delve into how HIV services work and consider all the different relevant recommendations that we might make. And this time we've done some learning from the tech sector, is actually thinking, right, we know that decisions can be made quickly. We've proven that in the last 9 months. Things can happen quickly. So we've developed a hackathon approach to service redesign. We're going back to square one, a blank sheet of paper, to recommend to the Scottish Government and the NHS different patient pathways for people living with HIV and how they access services. So rather than us taking a year to do that, we'll kick off in January, and we'll have recommendations by March, and that will feed into the Scottish Government's policy framework that's being redeveloped next year. We've learned that things can happen quickly. We've also learned that things don't have to be perfect on day one, and that people appreciate that honesty, that being involved in developing a service is also really important. So if you've got an opportunity to try something out, then now's the perfect time to do it, and work with the client group or the service users to develop that even further. We just launched the evaluation of HIV Self-Test Scotland, which showed that the service has gone down well with people that used it, but it's also shown where we can go next. And we did that wide-ranging evaluation only after 6 months of the project. So my thoughts are, do things quickly because we've shown that we can now, and don't feel like the car has to be a Ferrari on day one. Let it be a trike and build it up as you go.
Thanks very much, Nathan. There's some key things I want to pick up on that. I think it's all very well to have a trike in the middle of an emergency, but maybe in the rest of when we get back to normal, people won't be so keen. But anyway, we'll come back to that, and I move on to Ali, who can tell us a little bit about Be More Human and his response to COVID.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Yeah, in a lot of ways, I guess I've had it easier than Jacqui and Nathan. These are big organisations with established programmes, established expectations to think about, and then you have this big, massive change, and all these elements are kind of moving forward. So, Be More Human, I guess we only ever work with other people's challenges, so big challenges are business as usual. Is us, and the whole kind of idea that we set up with was about how do we bring human-centered change into being in a real and meaningful way. So I think we've talked about it for quite a while, but haven't really quite managed to do that. So because when things were relatively okay, change is quite difficult. So in that sense, a global pandemic has been really good for us, because it's given that kind of shake, and I guess we were right place, right time. So that being said, we were a brand new startup at the start of March, and the slender order book that we did have absolutely and utterly disappeared overnight. So when I say there was nothing, there literally was nothing there. So we did, I guess, what most folk in the voluntary sector did is we saw the fire that was burning or coming towards us, and we ran towards it, asking questions of our friends, our networks, our neighbourhoods, and saying, look, what can we do? What is it that needs done? What can be useful? We've got time, capacity, desire to do some good, and through that kind of just started working with a few bits of projects, a couple of projects. And one was the Go Beyond network in southwest Edinburgh, working with Space, Whale, Big Arts and a range of brilliant community partners down in the southwest to build a distributive network early doors, because we didn't know what COVID was actually going to mean for us, what it was going to bring. Was it going to be as apocalyptic as we worst thought for, or not? So, you know, built this network of organisations that if one went down, the services that were offered would still continue, and that sharing of ideas and resources and time and relationships with each other when we most needed it, right across the organisation, was fabulous. And then some redesign work with another excellent social enterprise called Get the Gen. So kind of we rewrote the whole training and service delivery model for these guys, which was an online, in-person, face-to-face training for businesses in the commercial sector to a digital first service. So really, you know, just helped kind of get that message out there. And as Nathan said, the kind of core of that was approaching it to say, you know, that we didn't let perfect get in the way of good. You know, we started where we were at, and you know, we didn't start with all of those skills, you know, all neatly stacked up. There were bits and pieces around, but there was a constant kind of do, learn, practice, learn, do, practice consistently with that, and just moving, and you know, just to finish, I guess the looking forward. But what have we learned? There's a brilliant quote that I've loved for many years by David Cooper Ryder, who's the forefather of appreciative inquiry, and he says that culture is formed in the crucible of crisis. So basically, when the chips are down, when it's really, 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 really tough, that's where we learn who we are. That's where we learn what we are, and that's where we learn what's important to us, because all the other crap falls away. And we actually, what we're left with is super, super important to us. So right now, you know, I think going forward, we've all had this kind of bit of a personal, a professional, and a kind of collective realization about actually what is important to us. And that doesn't come along that often because we tend to push change away naturally. So, you know, so for me, we're at this incredibly exciting crossroads where we've learned a little bit more about ourselves. We've learned a little bit more about what it means to be human, and what it means and what we really value personally, professionally, and organisationally. And going forward, we have a chance to reorder some of that, maybe in ways that we might not have done had this not come around. So ever the optimist. Yeah, delighted to share that, and delighted to be here.
Thanks very much, Ali. You've all raised a lot of really interesting points that we can go into in a little bit more depth. I think one of the key things that I pick up from all of three of you is that you have all responded really well. And my experience working on Never More Needed in Scotland has shown me that the voluntary sector as a whole has responded really well. There's been a lot of really successful pivoting. There's been the speed at which digital services have popped up has been fantastic. We've seen some just amazing engagement work with things like the youth sector. It's been really inspiring. It's also been exhausting, you know, and as we get to the end of the year and it's getting darker and we're still in lockdown and we're being told that we can get together at Christmas, but we probably shouldn't, you know, it's hard to keep the energy up. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are in terms of looking ahead to 2021 and whether or not you think we're going to have the energy to keep this fight going once the actual emergency is over, but the need isn't. Jacqui, what are your thoughts?
You know, looking forward to 2021. In fact, looking back quickly to March 2020, where we thought we were in, you know, lockdown for 3 weeks or so, and now we're, you know, rocking towards Christmas at a rate of knots. It's actually been a really quick year, and I think looking forward into 2021, certainly we are working on the basis that we're still working from home till the summer, so till June time. And some of the work that we've been doing around Way to Go is actually how we come out of this at the other side, and what do we do. So we're, I suppose, preempting what post-COVID might look like for us from a mental health and wellbeing service. I do have a bit of a fear that, you know, people are coping as best they can through this. Everyone has mental health, whether it's good or bad. And, you know, lots of us are really resilient individuals, but as we continue to go through this and go through the winter and a bit more lockdown and restrictions, when we come out the other side, and there's a vaccine and all of that, and we're allowed out into the world, into the pubs, into restaurants and all that, supermarkets, back to having a party, that is utterly terrifying for an awful lot of people. And that's when I think we'll see a spike in our services. So people who wouldn't traditionally access counselling services, I think, are going to be thinking, oh, hang on a second, I'm actually not sure how to cope with going back to what is likely to be a new norm, because the virus won't be away by next summer. Virus is here. It's here to stay, you know, even if there's a vaccine. So I think for us, we're kind of working, I'm certainly working on the basis of almost a year ahead, you know, 6 to 12 months ahead. What does that look like for us and how we prepare for that? And our Way to Go programme hopefully sets us up to respond to that at the other side.
And do you think, just quickly, do you think that programme has enabled your staff to see this change as less scary, the inevitable change that they've gone through this year and they will inevitably go through more next year?
Yep, I do. And I think even the fact that they're now delivering counselling virtually over a video conference platform, it might not be gold standard, but I think you mentioned it earlier, Ali, it might be just good enough, and it might be, you know, what enough people need. And counselling is a really traditional sector as well. You know, our colleagues go into that to do a face-to-face service, to have that connection with someone, you know, sitting just a few feet in front of you. But actually, the feedback I'm getting from staff is, can we continue to deliver a blended approach? Can we continue to deliver counselling virtually beyond COVID and you know, when we're allowed back into the real world? And that is honestly music to my ears, because yeah, we absolutely can. And it's just how we continue to look at our business model and how we make that happen as best we can.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Ali, what are your thoughts about looking around at people in the sector, about the energy levels that people have right now and their energy and appetite for continuing to embrace change next year?
I mean, it's profound. I mean, it's you know, probably one of the biggest challenges that we face, because actually our ability to cope and change and flex informs absolutely everything we do. Informs our people, our culture, our health. You know, it's the foundation, I guess, on which everything else is built. But for me, I guess there's a really important bit about reframing what change is or what energy is. You know, so I use those kind of two interchangeably, because energy is like it peaks or troughs in response to change. So if we see change as this big scary thing, then it's going to continue to be an absolutely profound challenge for us, because it's out there and it's big, and I don't know what it is, and I'm scared of it. You know, the fear is greater than the reality and all that sort of stuff. But one thing that I personally find hugely helpful is just trying to reframe that, to think, actually, well, wait a minute, change is just a series of unanswered questions. Right? And, you know, and we can cope with that. You know, change is something that we do thousands of times every single day as human beings. Change is something that, you know, that we are incredibly good at, because we're still here as a species. So if we can break that change down, and I guess the universal truth that change is constant, change is around us all the time, change is part of who we are, it's part of our job. And just appreciate that kind of, you know, our need or desire for perfection maybe isn't that kind of, it's perfectionism. It's maybe we don't know where to start. You know, maybe we're a bit scared. Maybe we're spread too thin. You know, maybe we're just not ready for it right now. And just being able to just fess up to that and say, do you know what, this is where I'm at right now. So whether it's in relationships at home or at work or across the team in the organisation, just being really kind of honest about that and saying that this is what it is. And then that is what I guess fuels this kind of idea that, you know, we don't have to make change all at once. We make it as a result of lots of small sequential steps, and if we see it like that, then all of a sudden it becomes something that we can do, rather than something, you know, that is insurmountable or something that's been done to us.
Yeah, great, thank you, Ali. That it's the reality is that change is part of life. That is that, you know, we're all going through it all the time. Doesn't make it less scary. I'm going to pop up the first poll now, and so if you could take a look at that when it pops up on your screen and answer it. Do you think your organisation has embraced opportunity in a crisis this year? Let's see what people have to say. Well, so far it's very reassuring. We've got 100% yes. A few little no's coming along now. I think there are a few more people who haven't answered. Perhaps that might be because they don't know. The poll results are, we have 88% said yes and 13% said no, but only about half of you answered. So I'm wondering whether that means people are a little bit unsure about whether their organisation has embraced change. Obviously, it's really reassuring that that most people said they thought they had. Nathan, you've been chatting to a lot of chief execs and people in the sector this year. What's your perception about how robust people have been in the face of change, and how ready they are to keep moving forward?
Yeah, I think I was probably surprised that people seem to take it in their strides in reality. I think one of the things that we've seen the power of for leaders in the charity sector is peer support and getting through that as well. And, you know, taking the time out and saying, right, we find this time valuable. It's good for our own personal development and our own sanity a lot of the time. And that was one of the reasons why I helped set up, you know, a Cosmos weekly chief executive check-ins, so that chief executives had that space. But I think also more broadly, you know, having also taken time out, and I know that other leaders have in the sector, taking time out just to chat to people out with, you know, what our normal work could be. There's been some great resilience in the sector. I guess that one of your earlier questions was, how does that move into next year? And I think that's going to be the struggle, because we're working at 110%, and that's not going to give up anytime soon. But at one point, people are going to need to change to something that's more manageable, or we're going to see quite considerable burnout, not just among senior leaders, but among all of our teams and staff as well. And I think that's definitely a concern. It's why I've given all of my team, we're shutting the office for 3 weeks over Christmas, so there's some extra time off. We don't provide an emergency service or you know, a crisis support, so we can do that. But it's definitely worth you know, one of the things that we've seen is staff not taking time off because they can't go away anywhere, but getting that time off and getting that time away from the laptop is absolutely vital. I know for me, from January onwards, I've blocked out 2 hours of my day to make sure there's no meetings in there, so that I can have lunch and I can go for a walk while it's daylight. And those are really important things too, not just for us as senior leaders, but for all of our staff to get across. You know, you don't have to be at your laptop 9 to 5. You don't have to work when it's convenient for you. You know, there's that, we've heard it so many times, we're not at home working, we're at home trying to work, you know, and that's really important. And as we move forward into next year, you know, we've got a vaccination coming, and we're going to be changing again how we work. We have to be as charity leaders really flexible to how people want that change to happen. You know, there'll be a lot of people that quite like working from home, and would like to keep that as the majority of their time. There'll also be people that are itching to get back into the office and itching to get back out and about, and I think we'll see a real shift, and that change of being flexible will need to happen.
Seeing as you've raised it, Nathan, yeah, flexible working is just one of the, I would say, one of the revolutionary things about 2020 that has the ability to make a huge difference to us as a society, to city centre economics, to where we live, to addressing the pay gap, for example. But from a manager's point of view, how easy is it to keep providing that flexibility? Different people probably require different things. Different people, you know, have different levels of efficiency. You know, if you're saying if you're very efficient, you can finish early, then does that mean if you're inefficient, you have to work late? How do you? What are your thoughts, Jacqui? And perhaps this internal group you've got have been addressing some of these issues, but about how we take the best that we've learned from flexible working in 2020 and apply it to a more structured, normal environment in 2021 and beyond.
So what we've been doing, Susan, is doing some staff surveys around how people are coping during work, and everyone's circumstances are different. You know, I was fortunate, it's only me and my 23-year-old son in the house, but you know, we've got colleagues who've got young children and have really struggled, and it's been amazing seeing everybody's animals popping up on screen and all of that. And I think certainly as an employer and as lots of employers across the world, well, we've relaxed a wee bit. I think, you know, it's, you know, we're not tiptoeing around saying don't make a noise, and it's just like, oh, here comes the cat, look at the cat, say hello. You know, so I think we have relaxed a wee bit. So we've been doing some surveys around, you know, post COVID, you know, would you want to work back in the office full time? Would you want to work in the office 50% of your time? All of that. So what we're doing through the Way to Go project and as a wider leadership team is looking at, well, what works for people, you know, because we know it works. We can deliver the service online. Does it meet the needs of all of our clients and service users? Probably not. But again, for me, developing a blended approach, it's almost like a blended staff delivery approach as well, is about meeting the needs and often customer choice. So how do we offer staff choice? And I think if we're offering staff choice, I think the benefits we get back from that will far outweigh any of the risks around performance. You know, we have, you know, monthly one-to-one performance meetings, we have an appraisal and a 6-month review and all of that kind of stuff, regular check-ins. But I think we need to be able to trust our staff to do a good job. And if we don't have trust, then something fundamentally wrong along the way, you know, and if that trust breaks down, then that's a different process that we'll look at in terms of how we can support staff. I think a blended approach for a lot of people would work really well. I've loved working in the house. I am very productive and very structured, and I can get things done. But I really miss the connection. I really miss just popping next door to say, do you want a coffee? How are you doing? How was your weekend? It's just not quite the same over a virtual screen. So we are kind of looking at it in consultation with staff and to see what that looks like at the other side. We know it works, so you know, that old added excuse of you must be in the office in 4 walls beside your computer, it's kind of been blown out the water by the pandemic. So there are some, I think you've mentioned it, Ali, there are some positives to the pandemic that have worked quite well for us. Every cloud has a silver lining and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the flexible working revolution, the working from home revolution, you know, I heard somebody said to me the other day, we're going to, it might have been Nathan, I don't think it was though, we're going to look back on a time when we insisted that people work in the office 9 to 5 as some sort of like slavery, you know, where you were forced to go into a city centre office and you weren't allowed to leave until 5 o'clock, as just a ridiculous way of working. But you also picked up on the fact that you've been more able to be more relaxed as an employer. And I'm thinking about, Ali, some of the things you were saying earlier about what's really important to us as human beings. And I'm wondering whether one of the things that we're learning from COVID is that over the last couple of decades, we've all worked too hard. What do you think?
Yeah, we probably worked too hard, but I guess that it relates brilliantly to that point, is that our normal kind of standard way of looking at things is like, you know, we approach the workforce and like it's a homogenous group. You know, like the office hours are 9 to 5, or the place of work is a fixed place. You know, these are negotiable or non-negotiable. When the reality is, you know, the workforce is never one homogenous thing ever. It is a whole group of individuals, you know, where individuals that need, you know, different things at different times, that, you know, work differently with different strengths. I remember one organisation, I won't say what it was, but one new manager tried to make me drive 75 miles to sit in an office with no windows by myself for the day, and I just refused. I was like, if it means me kind of losing this opportunity, so be it. You know, it was never part of the deal, because that was not about my ability to do the job. That was about their desire for control. You know, and we have to kind of, I guess, maybe as managers and leaders, kind of think about what are we setting up our organisations to do? You know, do we want people just to be compliant? Because I think that's maybe been part of the history. When in actual fact, I think what we really want, and what we've seen in COVID, is people being committed. People that are committed will go over and above. People that are committed will flex and shape. People that are compliant will go, sorry, that's not my job. You know, and I think, and particularly in our sector, you know, we need the commitment, but that commitment is two-way. You know, it is that ability to say, as Jackie said, we're more relaxed about it. Do you know what? If Nathan, if you need to take a walk at lunchtime, do you know what? It's not even just that, hey, you know, that's good to have. That is a necessity. You know, like, the world is hard enough to live in. You know, why are we building work to be, you know, effective and dehumanizing? There's a brilliant book called Lost Connections by Johann Hari. Talks about the kind of rise of anxiety and stress. And part of the reason for that is, you know, we're not connected enough as we used to be. So what can we do to support that as a workplace? We're not spending enough time outside as we used to. What can we do to sort that out as a workplace? You know, and so on. And these are the things that I guess as leaders we're in a position to influence in our workplaces. So how do we make that the norm, so we can build organisations that allow us to be more human and naturally rely on the strengths that we have, rather than building organisations that are stripping away at the stuff that, you know, we have developed over millions of years to protect us and to thrive and to grow. So, you know, that sort of stuff. And that's even more important now when we're looking forward into the future and we're going, I don't understand this. Because, you know, pre-COVID, it was like, technology's coming for my job. You know, or, you know, these economic changes are coming for my job, lack of funding's coming for a job. Now we've got this big, massive pandemic going on. You know, all of us have been through, the best understanding I've heard of it is grief. We've gone through this collective grief. So, you know, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. You know, we've all probably been on that journey and how we've responded to this. So the extension of that work that's just come out in the last couple of years is what allows us to move through the stages of grief is purpose and meaning. So can we find purpose and meaning in our work, and can our work allow us the space, the time, the flexibility to find our purpose and our meaning in other activities? So Google have 1 day a week where people can work on their own projects, right? They don't do that because, you know, they just go, that's probably a good thing to do. They do it because it increases their staff's ability to be creative and to find purpose and meaning, which means they're off sick less, which means they're more committed rather than compliant, etc., etc., etc. So, we really have this opportunity where, if we don't take some of these changes, then, folks that were struggling are going to leave. They're going to leave our sector because it's too much. So we've got to take the opportunity to start building people up again. And I think that the best term I've heard from a theoretical perspective is regenerative leadership. So systems and organizations and communities and societies that build people rather than take away from them. And we're not consumers, we're real live human systems. We wouldn't put a plant in a dark cupboard and expect it to grow if we don't, give it light and water. We're the same. We are living systems. We need to be nurtured, show us the light, give us some, food that nourishes us rather than anything. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox.
That's brilliant, Ali. You make a lot of excellent points there, and it makes me think about the fact that maybe in the voluntary sector, we've almost been trying to angle ourselves into a capitalist money-making kind of system that hasn't really worked for us as a sector, and that this has enabled the sector to really be open about how it can be more effective. So I think some of the panelists have pretty much answered Pat Graham's question, which is in the Q&A, which is about how you help people adapt to change. So I'm going to nip on to Kate Tobin has asked a couple of questions. And I'm going to take the second one first. She says, we've seen amazing innovations within the charitable sector, but she's keen to understand how panelists' relationship with public systems have changed and evolved during the crisis, and whether there's opportunities or challenges within this and ahead. And I think this is probably one for you, Nathan. You probably do work quite closely with public bodies.
Yeah, I think we've worked closer with public bodies in the last nine months, starting to provide services which we never used to. So like the HIV testing service, that's increased the level of funding that we get from different health boards, for example. But there's also been, the working with the government more closely to think about how we recover from COVID for sexual health and HIV policy, which has been a great opportunity for us as an organisation to be embedded in that process. I think, Scotland, Scotland has quite a unique approach, I think, in many respects. When I talk to colleagues in England, the commissioning of HIV and sexual health services is a mess, but also they don't work as well with public sector bodies as well as we do in Scotland. So we work hand in hand with the government, health boards, health and social care partnerships. And that's unique, I think, to us as a small country, where I can pick up the phone to the chief officer of Glasgow's Health and Social Care Partnership and we can have a conversation. Whereas you go down to London and some of the biggest organizations don't even know who these types of people are because they're so far removed. And I think that has allowed us the opportunity to pivot and grow and adapt and optimize what we've done over the last 9 months, because there's not been duplication of work or people working on things over here and not talking to the government about that. So I think that's a real unique approach that we've got in Scotland that allows for us to be more agile, and agility and creativity are two of the real important things that have got us to where we are right now, with quite a successful response to this pandemic, and it's what will get us out the other side towards the end of next year.
Yeah, I certainly, when I've been speaking to people in the voluntary sector in local communities, there does seem to have been a general feeling that there has been a bit of a shift in recognition across society of the role of the third sector in creating a healthy and happy society that boosts everyone's well-being. From a voluntary sector point of view, we obviously hope that translates into further support for preventative community services through things like funding. I don't know if this is a question you can answer, Jacqui, but are you optimistic that people in Glasgow City Council, for example, better understand the value of the sector as a preventative service?
I would certainly like to think so, Susan. Certainly from a funding point of view, we will tender for commissioned services. And I know that there's a school commissioned service coming out any day now, kind of thing. And I know the local authority have taken a fair bit of time to understand what that looks like and what that needs to involve before just popping it out. So they've not just popped out something that they've maybe done in the past. They've really taken time to think about it. So I would hope that that they would recognise the need for additional funding. I mean, obviously earlier this year, those of us who received what was integrated grant funding at the time, so that's that pot of money's ended now, and I know that a lot of third sector organisations were really impacted by the withdrawal of that funding. I'd like to hope that the local authority, having now been 8 or 9 months into the pandemic, really think about that in terms of their budgets next year and how they can support communities.
Yeah, thanks very much for Jacqui. I'm going to pick up Kate's other question. Kate Tobin is saying, she's asking about, specifically, Jacqui, about the blended model you've been implementing, or you're talking about implementing, in terms of when face-to-face is needed and when virtual is needed, and how you gather evidence for that. But I'm actually going to put that question to Ali first of all, because I'm wondering if he's seeing this in other organisations, looking at how they reintroduce both digital and face-to-face services, and how that might be managed, what questions they're asking.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, because it brings out the best and the worst of us, and the biggest opportunities and the biggest challenges all wrapped up into one thing. I think I'll start with what we're aiming for, what we should be aiming for, whether we're delivering services or whether we're working with our staff remotely, is something called empathic interaction. So it's this notion of how do we build human connection in a digital first space, and there are ways to do it. There are simple bits around how we do that, that help our people feel like people, that help our people feel connected, that help our people feel part of something bigger than themselves, rather than I'm working from home, I'm living and work effectively is the other side of that. So that need turn up the digital first stuff. You've got to turn some stuff up, you've got to turn some stuff down. So turn up empathic interaction, turn up trust and confidence, turn up psychological safety. It is a massive thing. How safe do we actually feel in our organisations when we are disconnected from the people that we know? So we'll get the norms in our office when we're around the same people all day. We're checking thousands of times a day that we fit in. When we're not in our offices and we don't have that culture, that all that stuff around about us, we've no idea what that is. So we're still looking for it, we're still searching for it, but we're getting nothing back. So how can we build that safety with our people to say, we trust you? Because the flip side of that is when we don't feed that, we start telling ourselves stories. And that's really, really dangerous, because we just grab anything. That's the way our brains work, is literally, if we don't have meaning or purpose or the story to hand, we will just make it up. And that can be really, really dangerous for the workplace. So, one of the things that I do in coaching sessions and stuff like this, right? Tell me, what's the story that you're telling yourself right now? And then fact check that. Where is the evidence that that story is true? And 9 times out of 10, personally speaking, I'm making it up because I'm acting out of scarcity. I'm worried. I'm fearful. I don't know what it is. And as soon as I name that, it becomes less scary, because I actually know what I'm dealing with, the root cause of it, rather than some big, scary, kind of unseen monster in the background that's just going to eat me at the next turn. So turn up the psychological safety, turn up the empathic interaction, turn up the trust. And I think the one thing that I'll finish on this is what we've learned more than probably anything in this is that we can trust our people. you know, and we have no issues in the sector trusting, you know, the folk that we work with in terms of our service users. Why is it such a big deal with trusting staff? You know, and we are relational services. You know, we're not transactional services. We don't rely on paying big salaries to get super high results. We build relationships and we sustain relationships. That's what we do. And if we keep doing that well, we'll never go far wrong.
Thanks, Ali. Jacqui, maybe you could answer from a bit of a technical point of view. Have you thought about how you decide how to introduce a blended approach to counselling, for example, when face-to-face would be appropriate, when digital would be appropriate?
Yep, so we've actually been thinking about this, Susan, well before the pandemic hit. So we've been thinking about this actually. Maddie will know this for almost 5 years. When I first joined the first cohort of digital leaders back in January 2016. One of the best decisions I ever made. You know, so we've thought about it, and for me, it's always been about offering customer choice. So think about the winter period, lots of scenarios. So we have a bad winter, bad snow. We're still expecting our staff to get from their home to an office base. We're also expecting clients to get from home to an office base to have a virtual appointment. So from a blended approach, that relationship is really important from a counselling relationship point of view as well. So if, for instance, you know, I was accessing a counselling service, met my counsellor face to face, and the next week there's, you know, it could be a pandemic, it could be snow, it could be whatever, a sick child that they have or something. If they've got the option to have their second or third session or whatever virtually, either by telephone or video call, that not only meets our needs as a business and our contractors' needs because we're meeting our targets and obligations, but it meets the needs of that individual. It's hassle-free, stress-free. They don't have to travel somewhere in poor weather conditions, or, you know, so there's lots of scenarios around that you can look at. Our processes from a technical point of view, we have a customer service team, small customer service team, who are fantastic. So they're the first point of contact for any of our clients phoning. We go through a bit of a triage process. We then have an assessment team who can get into a bit more therapeutic detail. And from that, we can have a discussion then with the client about what we think or what they think is the best method for them. Could be telephone, could be face-to-face, could be video call. It could actually be a blend of all of that. So I think it's just about having that dialogue. And if we have thinking into next year, if we have a team of staff who actually want to, most of our staff work part-time as well. So if they want to work from home for the 3 days that they work for us and just do either telephone or virtual counselling, why wouldn't we let them do that? Because all of the appointments are all logged in the system. Our CRM tells us, you know, the story of the staff members' workload and all of that. So why wouldn't we allow them to do that? Whereas there's other staff who are in the office face-to-face who are more comfortable delivering services that way. So
brilliant, thank you.
Choice.
Thank you. I think that's really good insights. Shall we finish up with our final poll, which will go live now, and if people can vote on it, that would be fantastic. Do you think 2021 will bring a new normal or a return to life as we knew it, or something in between? Maybe we shouldn't have put that option in, because everybody's going to say that, aren't they? Not a lot of people responding. Maybe you could say whether you want it to return to life as we knew it. So the main response seems to be something in between. And I think it's interesting that when I speak to people, I think that we've got optimists and pessimists in this situation. So Nathan's an optimist. He believes that COVID is going to transform everything and everyone for the better. And whereas maybe it's not a pessimist, really more of a cynic. Then you have your cynics who are saying, oh, well, the vaccine's just going to mean that everybody's going to return to normal and nothing's going to have changed. And then we're going to get another pandemic in another few years because we're going to all behave exactly the same way. And we're all doomed. I
Susan,
feel.
Can I jump in there and say how important it is to have both pessimists and optimists? Because back in tribal days, when the pessimists heard a rumbling in the bushes, you know, they were like, "Oh, I'm not sure about that. I'm going to move away." And the optimists were like, "Ah, what are you talking about? It's rubbish." The optimists were the first ones that got eaten when that tiger jumped out and ate somebody, you know. But it was the optimists that, you know, were saying, actually, there's something really cool on the other side of that mountain. We should go and explore it. And that's where they found, you know, the next source of food or whatever. We need both. We need both to, you know, and appreciate each other's natural strengths that we bring for protection or for exploration, because it's that mix between safety that we need to continue, and that's a currency for continuing and energy and adaptability and all that stuff. But then the innovation, which is that absolutely prerequisite that we must change. So new normal for me is a false promise. You know, I wish one phrase would disappear. I would take unprecedented in the vernacular rather than new normal any day of the week, because new normal is a fake promise. There's no such thing as a new normal. Life consistently changes all the time, and we perfectly adapt to that, and have done pre-COVID. We're doing it in COVID. We'll do it after COVID too.
That kind of sums it up, Ali. Thank you very much. What I was going to say is I feel like a little bit like the third sector bubble that I live in. It inclines me to be a bit more optimistic. You know, I've got a bit of cynicism within me, but a bit of optimism as well, because I do see how people have really adapted to change and how people want to step up and meet the need that is in their society and in their community. So I just thought, well, a few minutes left for Nathan and Jacqui to just give us some final thoughts on that. Nathan?
Yeah, I think that was interesting what Alistair said, because I know that I've built, you know, a team where there are checks and balances on my optimism. I went to my team at the start of this year and said, right, next year, let's raise £1 million. And everyone went, what? We turn over £300,000 a year. So £1 million is like ridiculous. I still have that ambition that we'll get the £1 million contract and, you know, we'll be able to do wonderful things. But it is right. You need to build the teams within the charity that bounces off each other, so that there is the right amount of optimism, but there's the right amount of that optimism being pulled back. And you know as well, Susan, I'm a big proponent of charities needing to shut down too. Like, there are some charities that can shut down because, well, not right now, but they can work towards shutting down, like HIV Scotland. We want to end the HIV epidemic, and once we've done that, there shouldn't be a need for us. And I'm a big proponent of that for some charities there is an end point, and we should work towards those endpoints, and success is those charities closing down. So that's optimistic and also pessimistic, I think, in that, you know, we're doing ourselves out of a job, but that should be a good thing. And, you know, if you're good at your job, you'll get snapped up somewhere else. So you shouldn't be thinking about having to continue the work of a charity that simply, you know, if we can end the HIV epidemic in the next year, I'd be quite happy with that. And I'm sure the people that are affected by HIV would be even more happier.
Yep, thank you, Nathan. And Jacqui, what about you? Do you think that we're going to look back on 2020 and see it as something that was actually quite a lot of positives?
I think so. Do you know, I'm ever the optimist as well, but there's a wee pessimist streak in me too. You know, and I think that's where I think we will look back and say, you know, it did bring opportunities. I think we'll also look back and say that was a damn hard year for everyone, you know, and it's been a hard slog, to be honest, for all of us. I think one of the things that we're certainly looking to do, and it comes back to one of Nathan's points about, you know, charities closing. Lots of organisations out there, funding's getting tighter, it's getting restricted. Everyone seems to have forgotten about Brexit. You know, and we leave on the 31st of December. You know, so what impact is that going to have on European funding and all of that kind of stuff? So I think there's an opportunity for organisations to join together, whether that's a merger, whether that's looking at what their services are that they're being provided and how we can deliver those in a joint way. So I do think from an optimist point of view, there's changes we could do together in the third sector. That might not necessarily mean a charity closes per se, if it closes for the right reasons, absolutely. But actually, how do we pool our resources and do things a bit differently and do things in a more joined up way?
Brilliant. That's a key thought for us all to go off with at the end, Jacqui. Thank you very much. So that's us run out of time. So thank you very much, everybody who has been viewing this webinar. Thanks to Ali, Jacqui and Nathan for speaking on the panel and giving us their insights. I've really enjoyed this discussion. Maddie Stark has been putting lots of resources into the chat, I've noticed. So please click on those and take a look at those. And if you want any further information about any of this, just get in touch with SCVO. And as I said at the beginning, this webinar will be available to watch on YouTube and an SCVO website. So if you've enjoyed it, just please do share it with colleagues. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.